everybody. This is CB Baker with a special episode of Everyday Strong with Dr. Michael G. Daniels. And the reason why this is special is normally we record like 1 week ahead of schedule. But Governor Northam, governor of Virginia, made an announcement yesterday that, hey, we're going to honor Juneteenth as a state recognized holiday starting this Friday, which would be June 19th. This is huge news. So, Dr. Daniels, how did it make you feel when you heard about the announcement?
Well, it certainly demonstrates that he is a person of action. And so I was appreciative of that because, oftentimes people want to do referendums. They want to, do all these other kind of things rather than just take decisive action. And I think what Governor Northam did was recognize that this is a time where we need thinking, reasonable people to make a broad statement, and so he made a broad statement by saying, hey, listen, Juneteenth is something that is recognized by other states, has been recognized by other states for some time. Virginia has lagged behind because it always is a laggard when it concerns civil rights and things of that nature.
Right.
And so he decided to bring us into the 21st century. And I applaud him because it's just wonderful to see how, if you think about what people were trying to do to divide us and make us go against him initially, the fact that he, did blackface and so forth and so on, all these kind of things. Which I've always said, what you do when you're in college and the pranks you do don't necessarily reflect, what's in your heart.
Right.
And so his professional life always said that he was a person that, that valued equity and equality. And this action, I think, seals the deal for me.
Yeah. I didn't hear about Juneteenth until I moved to Texas. Mm-hmm. And I moved to Texas, and here on the radio, Juneteenth celebration. I'm still like, oh, what is he talking about?
Right.
Cookouts and everything. It's like, what is? And people had to educate me on what it was. I was like, wow.
Yeah, and I would venture to say there probably are a lot of people. If your state doesn't celebrate it.
Right.
And unfortunately, a lot of our culture is not steeped in learning history.
Right.
So maybe we need to first let people know what Juneteenth is, how it came about, because I would say, and I'm not trying to, minimize the intelligence, of our listening audience, but like you say, a lot of people just don't know where it came about from, what we know that Abraham Lincoln, when he initially signed the Emancipation Proclamation, which indicated that all slaves in Confederate states were now freed.
Right.
And that was late 1862, and it was formally implemented during early 1863. But the timeline between it being actually put out there and Robert E. Lee surrendering to the North, he surrendered in I think it was January of 1865. So officially, at that point in time, if you were a slave in the South, you were freed originally, but if you were in the South, you still had to deal with the Southern, army. But now it was official. You were freed. But because they didn't have radio, they didn't have all these other things, a lot of the individuals in the eastern part of the country, they took their slaves and went to Texas. And so because, the news was slow, there weren't a lot of federal troops from the North in Texas.
Right.
And so they took the population of slaves grew up to 250,000 almost overnight in Texas.
Right.
And then I think his name was Granger, Gordon Granger, I think was a general, that when he finally got to Texas, to tell people that you are free was, June 19th. And so being slaves, they just called it Juneteenth because for them, they didn't know what 19th was for many of them. And so that for them was their really emancipation. And so from that following year, it was celebrated mostly in churches, because even though they were freed, the general, he told them they were free, and which is an interesting part of it. He told them they were free, but they still couldn't leave. You know? He said to them in his statement that you're free, however, don't leave your domicile.
Right.
Your status changes. And so now, rather than you being a slave and that's being your master, now you are an employee and that's your employer. And he said to them that we're not going to support you all if you are idle, you know. And so if you become a vagrant, we're not going to support you. And so they didn't even guarantee him safe travel to the North. And for valid reasons, I guess, because the irony of it is the Northern slaves still weren't free.
Right.
You know, it didn't affect, they weren't officially freed until December of the same year, you know, when the 13th Amendment, you know, came into being. So it's interesting when you think about the history of it, that there were people that were free but were still in slavery. And then when they was officially free from slavery, their wages were so low, they were still in slavery.
Right. So that's like you said, the history and brief history in a nutshell, which you can easily cover in school, you know, in one day, you know, one class, but they don't, you know, they just they don't even cover it in college. I mean, you have to literally take an African American history class, to get that.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. You know, well, when I was in high school, you know, African American history was just, you know, really becoming the thing. You know, in the 70s, it was like we were red, black, and green then.
Right.
So that's when you know, if you were black and you didn't take African American history, at least in the school I went to, you know, what's wrong with you? Right. And my homeroom teacher happened to be the teacher that taught African American history, and so for me it was a no-brainer. You know, take it.
Right.
Now I didn't take it because I really wanted to know African American history, because I thought I already knew it.
Right.
But what I found out was, all I knew about was, you know, George Washington Carver and Booker T. Washington. Right. I didn't know about all the other great things. But I'm just, again, so, you know, I'm so glad we are celebrating the holiday of Juneteenth. And in fact, I'm telling my staff that we're going to celebrate it even before it goes into law, because I think it's something that we all need to do. And I think moving forward, we as a culture, just like we celebrate the 4th of July, we need to make this an official celebratory thing for families, and I think it ought to be a time when we tell of our history, you know. So as because that's what originally what it was like, you know. As you said, you sat around, you ate food, you know, great cookouts and all those kind of things. But we need to tell people about our history, because most of our family members don't even know our history. Right. You know.
Yeah, and you know, now I'm gonna ask you a question. What would your response be to a person, what I call the internet trolls that's out there, that want to pit July 4th against Juneteenth and say, why do you need Juneteenth when you have July 4th?
Well, to me, it's an easy answer, because we celebrated the independence of the United States from England while blacks were still slaves. Right. So we were still in bondage. So, and even, you know, Juneteenth is I guess really representative of when we were free, because as we know, as you know, as you pointed out earlier, we know that on the East Coast, they knew early on that, you know, Lee had surrendered. Right. And in the northern states, they, you know, if you own slaves and you were in northern states, and some people, you know, probably, there are several people that didn't realize that there were northern states that had slaves too. If you own slaves in the northern states, you still were able to keep your slaves. Now, some people probably released them, but you were still able to keep them until until December of the same year, until the 13th Amendment was officially, you know, sanctioned, signed into law. So, you know, to me, if they say they don't want to do Juneteenth, because I can get it. Maybe you're saying, well, you have one official holiday in June, another official holiday in July that we're going to celebrate, you know, nationally or statewide. But we still have official holidays. We do the same, like we have November and we still have December holidays. So if you don't want to celebrate it in June, I would say we still should celebrate it, but maybe we should celebrate it in the actual month that either Robert E. Lee surrendered or the month when it was signed, by the president,
Right.
Lincoln at that time. So I think it has to be celebrated. The question just is what official day should we set aside to say this is the official day when we recognize, when, all black slaves were emancipated.
Right. And the thing that kind of bothers me with, and I get the internet troll thing. I get it. But what I don't understand is that's something that you really shouldn't troll unless you are flat out just racist. Mm-hmm. How can you be against the freedom of people? Mm-hmm. Like I've heard this one, I can't think of the guy's name, famous white supremacist that talks about, white supremacy and, what they're afraid of. When he had a real, deep conversation with another black person about, about things. Mm-hmm. I can wrap my head around his thought process.
Right.
But what I can't wrap my head around is you in total agree, like you want people to be enslaved. That's the part that you cannot, we talked about this before. You cannot be a God-fearing person and go to church, hear about Pharaoh and the Israelites, and come out of that thinking having slaves is okay.
Oh, absolutely. I would say, I don't think there's anything in the Bible, whether you Old Testament scholar, New Testament scholar, I don't know how you could say that, especially if you're a Christian.
Right.
I don't know how you can say you believe in Jesus Christ as your personal savior as well.
Right.
When you think about how he looked at the people who were poor, and how he was a defender of them and how he talked about them, and how he said that we are our brother's keeper in a sense, that we have to be doing those kind of things. We have to be lifting people up. The only argument, I should say the only argument, the argument that I've heard from people who are in the majority, the white folk, about keeping Juneteenth that I can somewhat, I won't say agree with, but I can accept it as a valid thing to say, is when they say we don't need another holiday because it costs them money. But see, that only applies to the business owner, right? If it's a paid holiday, then it's costing you money to have another paid holiday, because that's the same argument they use for Martin Luther King Day. That we don't want to have another paid holiday, that kind of thing. And that to me is it's kind of fickle argument, but okay, I can kind of buy it a little bit. But I'm with you. If you're not if you're not a business owner, then you have no argument.
Right.
You just have none. It doesn't impact you.
Yeah.
If you are a farmer, right, it doesn't impact you at all.
No, it doesn't.
If you work at McDonald's, it doesn't impact you, except it gives you a day off. You ought to be happy.
Yeah.
If you work in a hospital as a nurse, you ought to be happy. So if you are white and you happen to be a white nationalist, or you happen to be a white supremacist, you ought to be voting every day for every holiday because it benefits you.
Right.
So you ought to be saying, yeah, we're going to celebrate the emancipation or Juneteenth, give you an extra day to get in your pickup and have a good time.
Well, I tell you like this, as a business owner, I would tell them, like I told the Jehovah's Witness that was trying to get Christmas off. You going to work. I was like, you don't want to take nothing. You don't want to celebrate nothing. Well, the people who do need to be off, and then you can go work.
That's right.
I mean, if you don't want to, it's your choice whether or not to celebrate it or not.
Right.
That's the way I look at it.
It's crazy. I do one thing I don't want them to do, though. I'll say this, because I want the holiday. I don't want them to try to do for this holiday what they tried to do for Martin Luther King's holiday.
Yeah.
Don't tell me to go to work.
Yeah.
Don't tell me this is a day that I ought to volunteer.
Yeah.
Don't tell me this is a day to do all those kind of things. If you want me to volunteer, give me a volunteer holiday. Make it a day that, is volunteer day where everybody just volunteer their time. But don't give me a holiday and tell me to go to work.
But the NFL is the one that screwed up the Martin Luther King Day. Because it fell right after Super Bowl, which was perfect. Because nobody really wanted to go to work after Super Bowl. You've been up all night. You watched the game. I don't want to have to go to work. And then NFL added 2 more games and then pushed everything out.
Well, I know, and I don't get me wrong. I love Obama's presidency, but him and his wife had a big, they were a part of that push.
Yeah.
To say we ought to take this as a day to contribute to improving society, as Michelle Obama, put it. And of course, her husband echoed that sentiment. And again, I love both of them, and I think that the sentiment is I'm okay with it, but not on my holiday.
Right.
If a holiday to me is not a time to work, a holiday to me is a time to celebrate. Now, if they just said celebrate, and let me throw this out there too for all my friends, because I know I'm gonna get some blowback on this one right here. I want to do the same thing on Martin Luther King Day and on Juneteenth that I do on other holidays. Okay, so if I do, I know originally churches were celebrating Juneteenth. If the church does celebrate Juneteenth, I don't want it to be a day where we just all gather around and sing hymns and cry and boo-hoo. No, let's have a cookout and have a good time.
Right.
That's what we want to do. It's almost like even on Martin Luther King Day, Martin Luther King Day, by the time you have, I'm invited to 4 or 5 Martin Luther King Day services.
Right.
Where somebody's preaching or somebody's reading his I Have a Dream speech, or somebody's trying to, go through his letters from the Birmingham jail, and, then they want, now let's go in the community and pick up some trash and this kind of thing. It's a holiday for me, a holiday. So no, I don't want to, take away from the holiday spirit. I want to celebrate, because I celebrate my freedom by having a day when I can do everything that's enjoyable to me. That's how I look at it.
Yeah. And also with Juneteenth is, honestly, it should be celebrated the way July 4th is celebrated.
Absolutely.
It's the time, the date that America as a whole was supposed to wake up. Mm-hmm. Now, it's still somewhat sleep, but that was a day that, okay, everything should be working out good starting today.
Right.
And that is the one thing you can culminate a lot of stuff as Americans and especially as African Americans. The unfortunate thing is I've been on Amazon all week trying to find red, black, and green stuff to wear on Friday. And all of it is none of it's coming in before June 19th. Right. So, but what is your plans to do on Friday?
I plan to celebrate. I'm taking some time off from the church, so I'm gonna be celebrating out of town on Juneteenth. Right. Unless something happens extraordinary, I'm gonna be cooking out and celebrating.
I feel you.
Like that. When you mentioned the NFL, and I'm gonna say this, and the NBA, those are 2 organizations that really need to celebrate Juneteenth.
Definitely.
And
college sports too.
Right. They need to really celebrate Juneteenth because they benefited tremendously by Juneteenth.
Yeah.
When you think about the billions of dollars that they earn, primarily, I think Goodell finally admitted it. That if it was not for black players, the NFL would fold. Yeah. And so they ought to be all for celebrating it. Maybe they ought to have just one day where all sports, you just get in for free. That's on Juneteenth, we're gonna have a special preseason game and you get in for free.
But what's crazy is Major League Baseball will do things like that for Jack and Robinson. Mm-hmm. It's like they don't really get enough credit in my book for the things that they have done for diversity things. some of it was they had to because they was getting players from the Dominican, and Cuba that weren't supposed to be here,
right?
So they had to they had to go ahead of the curve a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And NBA, of course, is doing great things. The NFL right now is the one that's lagging, but it's finally woke up and said, okay,
yes,
it's time for us to get on board. Now, next question. Colin Kaepernick. I know this is not about this Juneteenth, but I got a little time, so I'm gonna ask you: do you think Colin Kaepernick should sign if he is offered a contract to play in the NFL?
That's a difficult question because we know that it would just be a token signing, Now, but by the same token, if they give him a guaranteed minimum,
right,
then I would take the money. The likelihood of him starting, I think, is slim and is extremely slim. Are there several teams that he should start on? I would say yes. But 3 years out of the league, I just, you got to be an exceptional person.
Right. He ain't Michael Vick.
Right. I don't, whether he is or not, I don't know. But I'm just saying, you got to be exceptional. And even Michael Vick's skill set deteriorated,
Yeah.
It's not like he came back and was the same Michael Vick he was in Atlanta.
Right.
And he got beat up quite a bit when he got to the Eagles.
Yeah.
If I were him, would I come back? I don't know how much money. I don't know how much money he got in the settlement. But if I had enough money in the settlement, I would not come back. I personally would not. But if I didn't, because if you come back, what may happen is you lose all those other endorsement deals that you are, riding high on right now.
Yeah.
That you got by not being in the NFL. If you come in the NFL and your skill has diminished, so therefore you're no longer, high enough in the fans' eyes. You lose some, endorsement deals now. If you come in and you get sacked 3 or 4 times and your interception to touchdown rate is like, 2 interceptions per touchdown.
Yeah.
Your value is gonna sink dramatically.
Because one thing that did help out Muhammad Ali was when he came back, even though he lost the first fight back against Joe Frazier, he went on to keep winning after that. Right. And his skill set was still there. What we don't know is whether or not, Kaepernick can actually.
Right. There's only they're not a whole lot of Muhammad Ali's.
No, it's not.
That can come back the way he came back. And you still saw the rust, like you said.
Right.
The first fight with Joe Frazier, even though the fight's up to Joe, he was the old Muhammad Ali in a sense.
Right.
But the first fight with Joe, Joe clocked him a couple of good times.
Right.
And he wasn't the float like a butterfly kind of guy that he was before he left.
Right. All right, so we're out of time. Thank you all so much for tuning in for this special edition of Everyday Strong with Dr. Michael G. Daniels. This is your host, CB Baker. Peace.